Planet Mission Part 1 by David Claiborne, as read by the author. New chapters every Monday. The full novel is available on Amazon.com and other online retailers. Links in the description. Chapter 13. A Polar Bear. It was slow going. There was no path, only a general direction. The sight of the trees that had lifted their spirits proved false hope. They did not seem to be getting any closer. The trees on Polus are enormous, Junebug explained. They would be visible from many kilometers away. The whine of the rover's electric motors filled the cabin with white noise. Although the grass was no longer as dense, the terrain remained rough and they jostled back and forth uncomfortably from time to time. They had been traveling for several days, and the difficult trip sapped their energy. No one had the will to start a conversation. Those who attempted to pass the boredom with naps risked an unceremonious awakening from unwelcome bumps. Waters grew worried. He was thinking of their schedule and goals. He had significantly underestimated the difficulty and time the journey would take. Molly, whose turn it was to drive, said nothing but looked uncomfortable. Jazzy sat in the front passenger seat with her knees drawn up and eyes closed, failing to sleep. Tommy had enough of the inside the rover. "I'll take a turn up top now," he said. He passed through the hatch and found Bo holding a strap attached to the rover's antenna with one hand and struggling with a pair of binoculars with the other. He was seated on the roof, hunched over, and looked miserable. Bo acknowledged Tommy with a grunt as the lieutenant came through the hatch but made no other motion. He was leaning against one of the protective hoops that surrounded the antenna, forming a makeshift stool. Tommy shrugged, hooked himself to the antenna, and hunkered down next to Bo, holding on for stability. "Aren't you going to go inside?" Tommy asked. "There's room now with me up top." Bo shook his head from side to side slowly. "The fresh air feels better," he said. He looked as if the rover's next lurch might rob him of his lunch. Tommy made a gesture that said, "Whatever you want." Bo relaxed a bit and allowed the lash and hoop to take the weight of his body a little more. This might have been pleasant under normal circumstances. The rover was crowded and the windows small. The roof had the best view and everything was new and different. However, the trip had worn them all down and motion sickness had set in for some. Bo was determined not to ask Jazzy for any medication. He felt a strange combination of excitement and discomfort talking to her under normal circumstances. Besides, he didn't want her to think he was weak. It was growing late. The gas giant loomed large in the sky above, seeming to mock their progress with its unchanging, unshifting dominance, ever the same no matter their struggles. The setting sun was low enough to shoot its rays under the clouds that had been with them all day. Although it made everything seem golden, the blinding light slowed their progress further. According to schedule, they had intended to reach the colonists that day. It was clear that would not be happening. Not today, probably not tomorrow either. The heads-up display told Molly that the batteries were close to empty. She swept the widget off the screen and onto the tablet on the console. The clouds had prevented the batteries from recharging efficiently, a fact that was contributing to their slow progress. If tomorrow were sunny, they might be able to continue. Now, however, they needed to start thinking about a place to spend the night. Suddenly, the rover broke through the tall grass, lurched down a small embankment, and came to stop in a bog. Tommy and Bo toppled forward, gripping the straps that held them to the roof. The rover's wheels continued to spin, kicking up water against its sides and sinking the craft past the wheel hubs. Molly dragged the throttle back to suspend the drive. The rover was very much stuck. "Why didn't you warn us?" Waters' voice cackled over their phones at Tommy and Bo on the roof. He was irritated, but they were all growing less patient the longer their journey took. It was a stupid question. No one could see anything through the grass, which was taller than the rover even now, and the sunlight pouring under the clouds made it difficult to see. Something like leafy green duckweed floated on the water, completely obscuring the bog below. None of them could have possibly known what lay beneath, and their exhaustion was in danger of getting the better of them. In any case, it was clear they were not in a mere pond. "Try again," Waters said to Molly. She moved the throttle forward. The wheels spun and kicked up a peat-like plant, painting the sides of the rover. Molly brought the throttle back. It was no use. "There's solid ground just ahead," Tommy called from the roof. "It looks like it's covered with low grass. If we can get there, things should go smoother." Waters and Junebug leaned forward to peer through the rover's windshield. Even Jazzy stirred. A few meters farther they could see the grass. Beyond that, towering trees signaled the edge of a forest, the same forest they needed to traverse to reach the colony. Tommy hopped down on one of the tires. Holding on to the enormous treads, he tested his footing. "The weeds feel thick enough to walk on," he said. Waters looked to Junebuck. "Given how sturdy the rest of the vegetation has been, he might be right," he answered in reply to the unasked question. They soon tested the idea. Tommy was first. He stepped off and put his weight on the peat. The plant matter gave way beneath him slowly, but he found that if he kept moving, he could stay on top. "Here goes," he said. He let go of the tire and sprung out across the top of the bog, comically lifting his knees and feet extra high to stay abreast of sinking. With a few quick steps, he made it to solid ground, huffing from the effort. Waters, not to be outdone, opened the side door and, imitating Tommy, stepped out onto the bog. He promptly fell face first into the muck, soiling the white clothes Alice had given him. The distribution of his body weight kept him from sinking, but Tommy had to walk back to help him and ended up knee-deep in the bog himself. Together they walked to shore where Waters shook him off. "I can manage myself," he said, becoming even more irritated at being embarrassed. The others followed cautiously. Eventually all made it to solid ground. "This grass is especially tough," Junebuck remarked, stepping onto the close-cropped hard ground which crunched and squeaked beneath their feet like cold snow. "It almost looks like it's been cut." Junebuck bent down to examine the plants. He brushed the grass with his hand, and with a cry he pulled away sharply. His hand was scratched deeply. Blood oozed from where he had touched the ground. "It's sharp!" he cried. Jazzy tended to Junebuck as best she could, glad to have something to do after days of monotony. "Everyone be careful," Waters warned, stating the obvious. Molly went back to the rover and grabbed a tarp. She spread it over the ground and bent down to observe the grass. "It looks almost as if it's been eaten close to the ground, like sheep or goats would do back home," she said. Jazzy drew a breath in suddenly and froze in place, Junebuck's bandage dangling in her hand. Not more than 30 meters away, an enormous beast emerged from the tree line. It was larger than the rover, which was no small feat. White fur covered its body. It had 4 large limbs thick like tree trunks, and 6 tiny wings set on its back just between its shoulders, comically small compared to its bulk. It ambled forward towards the bog with a series of muffled grunts and gave a satisfied shake. Waves of light passed across its fur as it ruffled and shook. With a relaxed sigh, it dipped its massive head into the bog, plunging its snout through the peat. It sucked in water with a slurp and raised its head high. Jaws opened to reveal large plates of teeth like baleen. The animal sprayed the water back over the bog through its teeth. Liters and liters came out in a fine mist. Finishing, the beast turned and dipped again. "A Polus bear," Molly whispered, hunkering down. "A polar bear?" Bo said. "It's feeding," she said. "Quiet," Waters hissed through his teeth. "There are no polar bears here. It's a Polus bear, one of the native species." The Polus bear finished spraying the water from its maw and crunched on something lazily for a few seconds, rotating a bit and dipping its snout into the bog once more. With its muzzle immersed, it looked up at last and fixed its dark eyes on the mission team. In an instant it extracted itself from the bog and reared up onto its hind legs. 4 front feet pawed the air. It gave a deep sonorous bellow that echoed off the trees. The team covered their ears and recoiled. It was monstrous and terrible at its full height. It lingered there on 2 legs for a moment, looking at and through them. Flashes of bright light traced striped patterns across its fur. Jazzy let out a cry and bolted. Junebuck and Bo followed without a word. "No, don't run!" Molly shouted. With the sudden movement, the Polus bear dropped onto all fours, its weight sending a shockwave through the ground, and fled to the trees with a speed that belied its size, flashes of orange coursing its fur. It was gone in moments. Jazzy tripped and fell headlong onto the sharp grass. She put out her hands to brace the fall, the sharp grass scratching her palms, forearms, and legs terribly, tearing the clothing Alice had given her. Junebuck and Bo, unable to stop their momentum, tumbled over Jazzy, receiving the same injuries and worse from the rough grass. "Stop! It's gone! It's gone!" Molly shouted, running up to them, trying to calm them as they scrambled to their feet, ready to take flight once more, their wounds already red with blood. "We need to get out of here!" Bo shouted. "It's gone!" Molly repeated. "Why did you run? Running from any animal could prompt it to chase you." Waters and Tommy trotted up behind her, looking back over their shoulders cautiously. "Of course we know that," Bo countered. It was his turn to be embarrassed. Bo turned away to avoid Waters seeing his exasperated expression, but Tommy could not contain himself, or did not care to. He grinned. "Wipe that smart grin off your face, soldier," Bo said. "I'm a Marine." "I don't care what you are," Bo said, frustrated, tired, embarrassed, and angry because of it. "I may not be director, but I report to Mufasa just the same. This will certainly go in my documentation, which your superiors are sure to read." With the Polus bear gone, adrenaline subsided and they calmed. As it did, the three who had fallen noticed their wounds. Jazzy tried to flex her fingers and gasped in pain. The others fared little better. Junebug's jacket had survived the tumble and protected his torso, but it was full of tears and rips. Bo's jumpsuit and Jazzy's white suit were in tatters. "My hands!" Jazzy cried. "You should see your face," Tommy quipped. "Tommy!" Molly said, surprised at how flippantly he treated the whole situation. Jazzy shot him a look that somehow managed to be both plaintive and murderous. It was the wrong thing to say, and he meant something else by it, but he was right. Her face was cut, bleeding and covered in dirt. Her hair was in uncharacteristic tumbles about her head. Little strands like tendrils sought escape in every direction. "Don't pay the veteran position any attention," Bo said. "Speaking of positions, where were you when that thing came out of the trees?" Tommy just snorted and walked away. "What good is having a rifle if you're not going to use it?" Bo asked. "Can you help?" Waters asked anyone in general as he tried his best to tend their wounds. "I'll do it," Molly said. "Ha!" Jazzy said with scorn. She was embarrassed, too. "You didn't warn us about the Polus bear. What makes you think you're of any use right now?" Molly reddened but ignored Jazzy's comments and tended to Junebug, who had found a rock and sat down. Bo walked with Jazzy back to the rover. "I'm sorry," Junebug said. "I should have known better. We don't know anything about this place, and here I am sticking my hands into strange plants and losing my head." "It's nothing," Molly responded. "None of us are used to this place. Here, Tommy, Alex, take these and go help the others." "What am I supposed to do with these?" Waters asked as he received the bandages Molly passed to him. "You saw what Jazzy did earlier for Junebug?" Molly asked. "Yes, I saw. It's that simple. Clean it and bandage it." As the sun set and the blue light of Polus once more filtered through the clouds, they worked patching each other up. They decided to spend the night in the rover, wanting no more encounters with bears of any kind, polar or Polus. "I doubt the bog would make any difference to one of them. They're big enough," Tommy commented. "Hush," Molly said. When they got to the rover, they found its doors shut. "The wounded need room to recover," Bo called from the rover's hatch. "That won't leave space for the rest inside, unfortunately. I will tend to Jazzy tonight at least." "You expect us to spend the night outside? Who knows what else comes out at night?" Junebug said. "I understand," Bo said, as he disappeared back inside the rover. Molly, although she was not eager to spend the night outside either, felt obligated to speak up since animals were her expertise and part of her responsibility. "I don't think we have anything to worry about," she said. "The moon's fauna is almost entirely made up of herbivores. I don't think the Polus bear is dangerous, just big." Junebug was not convinced. "What's to say one of the exceptions won't find us? Even if they are herbivores, that monster could have crushed us without a second thought. Healing or not, the rest of us are injured too." "I'm fine," Tommy chimed in. He seemed to find the whole situation to be great fun. "And she's right, Polus bears aren't dangerous. Far from it, we probably just scared that one." "You can be the first to sleep outside then," Junebug said. "Junebug, I understand your concerns, but my injuries are very real," Jazzy's voice came over their phones. Waters spoke up. "It's all right, Jazzy, we can make room." Their phones went silent as Waters and Jazzy switched to talking directly. Jazzy argued that her position as the mission's physician merited special consideration. Waters responded that her wounds were no worse than everyone else's, and there was plenty of room for them all in the rover. In the end, they compromised. Only Junebug, Bo, and Jazzy, the three who were injured, could stay inside. Molly, Waters, and Tommy, who were uninjured, had to give up their places in the rover. "Makes no difference to me," Tommy said. "I suppose that's the best we're going to get," Waters said, although he was not eager to test the accuracy of Molly's assessment of Polus IV's fauna any more than the other missionaries. Molly did not bother to offer an opinion. With the decision made, there was no use arguing, but they were not looking forward to spending the night outside either. Razor-sharp grass aside, which seemed all too capable of shredding their equipment, Junebug was right about the Polus bear. Whether it intended to or not, an animal of that size could hurt them. Sprawled out asleep on the grass, they made much easier targets for even accidental crushings. The three clambered up the tires and on top of the rover. With Tommy's help, they spread out tarps over the antenna like a tent and prepared to spend the night under the stars.